Good afternoon, or good evening, or good morning, depending upon where you are around the world. I am Marcus Holmes, the HR Passion Guy. And you've heard in recent news all of the many tragedies around violence in our world, in our schools, in our grocery stores, and in our organizations. And so today we have a wonderful guest, a very knowledgeable guest, who's going to talk to us about prevention of workplace violence and many other aspects, discrimination, harassment, that he's going to talk to us about. It's another edition of Passion Fridays. Everyone says that something should be done about the amount of violence that we're seeing in our world. And almost everyone is pointing to someone else to solve the problem. Well, what if you could do things, take actions, have a plan, have a strategy to prevent violence from happening? Maybe not 100%, but we must come up with ways that can deter and stem violence before it even occurs in our organizations. Well, my guest today is going to talk to us about that. And I'm very privileged and honored to have him, John Byrnes. He is a successful businessman, author, and lecturer who became interested in the subject of aggression management after concluding that there were no comprehensive training programs dedicated to preventing aggression in the workplace. His research revealed that other methods being used to deal with conflict and violence were not working. In 1993, John formed the Center for Aggression Management in Orlando, Florida, to train organizations and individuals to use aggression management techniques to recognize aggressive behavior and to prevent violence by managing aggressive behavior. Since that time, he has served as the CEO and lead instructor for the Center for Aggression Management, having provided training to individuals from over 500 organizations and growing, institutions and governmental agencies throughout the United States. The training demonstrates to individuals and employers that they can prevent aggression rather than merely reacting to it with methods like active shooter training. Results include the reduced risk of aggression related violence, reduced risk management cost, and improved productivity. John was selected by the U.S. Department of Labor to represent the United States at the Violence as a Workplace Risk Conference held in Montreal, Canada. The conference is a joint effort by the United States, Canada, and Mexico through the North American Agreement on Labor Cooperation, the NAFTA Labor Side Agreement. John has worked with many Fortune 200 companies and met with DARPA, DHS's Science and Technology Directorate, and worked with the U.S. Army Night Vision and Electronic Sensors Directorate. He was the keynote speaker at the first Protective Security Conference in 2008, sponsored by Walmart, and it included the world's leading professionals in protection and security, representing such organizations as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Coca-Cola Company, Cisco Company, Microsoft, Dell, Amazon, Kellogg Company, Kissinger and Associates, Overseas Advisory Council, and many more. John led the creation of the Campus Aggression Prevention System, CAPS, for colleges and universities. John conducted training for individuals from more than 500 campuses through the National Center for Higher Education Risk Management and the National Behavioral Intervention Team Association. In 2010, John added the Meter of Emerging Aggression, the MEA, to CAPS and further expanded it, incorporating all of the knowledge and training he had developed for preventing aggression in the workplace. This updated approach was renamed the Critical Aggression Prevention System, CAPS, In 2013, after 2 years of application, CAPS was scientifically validated by Eastern Kentucky University's student assistance and intervention team members. Along with all of that, some of his noteworthy achievements and accomplishments: he's a Navy veteran, insider threat prevention trainer for the U.S. Army Special Ops Command Terrorism Division in 2016, authored the NABITA threat assessment tool, now being used by behavioral intervention teams in more than 177 colleges and university campuses, presented at more than 100 conferences dealing with violence in the workplace, campus, church, or school, and awarded an honorary doctorate of humanities in 2000 for his discovery and development of aggression management. I am so honored to have John with us. And John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, it's my great pleasure, Marcus. I'm happy to be here, and I look forward to sharing what we have with your audience.
Thank you so much. And so I'm going to bring up your presentation and turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Brilliant. Okay, well, here it is. We're going to introduce you to the Critical Aggression Prevention System, or CAPS as we like to call it. Marcus offered me excellent questions, and I said to Marcus at the time, without an understanding of what it is that we have and how it is applied, the answers I give won't be very cogent for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a short presentation that illustrates what is this that we have, why is it so unique and innovative, and then at that point we're going to come back to those questions, and Marcus and I will go through them piece by piece, question by question, and answer them as such. So the first assertion I'm going to make is cutting edge knowledge. What is it? We believe that employers deserve the best in cutting edge knowledge regarding preventing common workplace issues like sexual harassment, bullying, abuse, discrimination, assaultive and violent behavior, as Marcus pointed out, but also things like distrustful behavior that undermine both the teamwork, leadership, and loyalty. But what does cutting edge knowledge really mean? Does it mean getting the scene of an incident of, say, sexual harassment after it's already occurred? Or does it mean actually preventing that incident, getting involved before it, and actually preventing that occurrence from happening in the first place? Well, we believe that the information, if we're able to provide you with information that will not only prevent sexual harassment, bullying, abuse, discrimination, assaultive and violent behavior, but also, and distrustful behavior, but also with scientific reliability. Now, I use that phrase, so I'm going to apply an entire slide to exactly what that means. And not just with scientific reliability, but also without violating, infringing upon privacy regulations. Wouldn't this be cutting edge knowledge? Well, that's exactly what I intend to share with you today. Our critical aggression prevention system was originally designed to prevent assaultive and violent behavior. But we realize that these precursors that the FBI and the Secret Service refer to as identifying someone on the path to violence, we prefer to call that the sequential successive precursors to violence, which enable us to get out in front of violence and prevent it. So what I'm going to be sharing with you is not only how we can help you prevent violence, but also how we can help you prevent these other elements like sexual harassment, abuse, bullying, etc. So the critical aggression prevention system is made up of three key components. Two are training, one is software. Because you cannot train all people with all skills, we have what we call aggression first observers. These are the people on the front lines of aggressive behavior. They see it all the time. And we give these individuals objective, measurable observables. These are not the subjective references of scary, strange, weird, and menacing that take you down the rat hole of he said, she said. These are objective, measurable observables. And they identify them and they record them in their app. I'll go into more detail about that in a moment. Those then wind up in the hands of certified aggression managers. These are individuals who are trained to engage and diffuse and also conduct what we call the judicious interview. I'll get into more detail about what that is. And finally, how do we forensically record and track this behavior? Well, the first question that comes up is, well, aren't we going to invade people's privacies? Here's the key. Number one, we do not use mental health assessments. They are notoriously inaccurate, and we can talk more about that as we get further into this presentation. We do not use mental health assessments, so we do not violate HIPAA regulations. We do not use culture, gender, education, age, sexual orientation, or religion. So we do not violate FERPA in our schools or the Civil Rights Act of 1964. What do we measure? We identify and measure aggressive behavior and judge it on its merits. You'll learn a lot more about that as we go through this process. So we use both a CAPS mobile app and a CAPS dashboard to record and track. And because we don't violate privacy regulations, we can record and track with a certain impunity. So what is it that we discovered some 28 years ago that was so profound? We discovered that there are two kinds of aggressive behavior. One we call primal, the other we call cognitive, and they both have continuum. So let's take a look at what this means. The first thing we found was primal aggression. Primal aggression is built on the primal instincts of fight or flight. It is fueled by adrenaline. That connection between aggression, the production of adrenaline, the increase in the heart rate, and the resulting body language and behavior that we can both identify, but most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, we can measure it. When I was working with the military, we were using infrared. And if we could get a square inch of skin, we could identify a person's pulse rate remotely and watch it go up and down based on the stimuli. This is hard science. But it also represents someone losing control, i.e. the adrenaline rush. So what do we expect to see in the extreme? We expect to see what I like to call the red-faced, ready-to-explode guy. Don't you love that image? The red-faced, ready-to-explode guy. But if this represents someone losing control, what about conscious, deliberate aggression? It didn't fit. So for this, we developed cognitive aggression. Cognitive aggression is simply conscious, deliberate aggression, or non-conscious in that someone repeats it often enough that they no longer give it a lot of thought and they become a vicious person. We tend to know some people like that. But it's based upon intent. Simply put, what is your intent with this person or persons? Is it in your interest and theirs, therefore a win-win as it ought to be? Or is it in your interest and to their detriment? In other words, at the lowest levels, you're victimizing a person. You're victimizing individuals. The next level, and we're going to go into these in detail now, but the next level are predators. These are people who want what you have, but they don't want to give you recompense. They don't want to give you money for it. So they're just simply going to take it. This we sometimes call criminal intent, like a robbery. The highest level, the ninth stage, the highest level of cognitive aggression, the ninth stage cognitive aggressor is the perpetrator of murder, suicide, or terrorist. Let me introduce you to Zacariah Moussaoui, often referred to as the 20th hijacker. And a quick look at these two facial expressions tells you a lot. The guy on the top, which frankly, most security and law enforcement see as the most dangerous, the guy on the bottom is far, far more lethal. You see, we've come to realize that when any human being, regardless of their culture, gender, education, age, sexual orientation, or religion, when any human being rises to the intention where they're prepared to give up their life for a cause, their body responds to that intention by losing animation. In essence, the body says, I'm dead, and it takes on that look. What do we see? What the military referred to as the 1,000-yard stare. Others refer to it as dead eyes. But ladies and gentlemen, it's more than this. Their whole body language and behavior loses animation. The Israelis call it the walking dead. And here's the key. From the moment of commitment, let me give you this definition. From the moment of commitment, that's when an assailant decides to pull that weapon and start shooting, to when the first round is discharged, is just 2 seconds. No security, no law enforcement, no matter how well trained or equipped, can reliably be on scene in just 2 seconds. So what will they do? They will do what they've been trained to do with active shooter response training. They will step over the dead, dying, and or wounded victims to get to the shooter. You see, ladies and gentlemen, that's unacceptable to me. We have to get out in front of that horrific moment of commitment. And that's what I intend to show you how to do. So, now what you're looking at is the continuum. We have the primal aggression continuum on the right. We have the cognitive aggression continuum on the left. And together they're a continua. 2 continua is a continuum. So we have the primal and cognitive aggression continua. Let's take a look at this. So let's start at the bottom and build our way up. The first thing we see is that there are triggers. We all experience triggers, ladies and gentlemen. You get up late. You go in for coffee and breakfast. There is none. Your stomach is grumbling. You get 3/4 down the driveway to go to work and you realize it's garbage day and you forgot the garbage. You jam on the brakes. You grab the garbage cans, drag them to the street. Now you get into morning traffic. We all have these triggers that occur all the time. But the difference is we cope. We cope. When a person stops coping, when one trigger builds on top of the next, we enter into the escalation phase and what we term mounting anxiety. Why is that important to understand? Because mounting anxiety changes us. It changes our body language. It changes our behavior. It changes the way we communicate with each other. We can identify these changes early on and actually prevent any further escalation from occurring. The next thing I want to share with you here, you'll see that there's a low risk, a moderate risk, and a high risk. Why is that so important? Well, here in the state of Florida, we had the Parkland shooting. And there were 45 calls made on Nicholas Cruz's bad behavior to the school district, to local sheriff's office, and even to the FBI. And no one felt the sense of urgency to do something enough to prevent that from occurring. So we build into our system the sense of urgency, because it's not just you're going from stage 3 to stage 4, you're going from low risk to moderate risk. And now you know that if you do nothing, now you might be at risk. So now you have the impetus to get involved where before you did not. We know that sexual harassment, conflict, bullying, abuse, discrimination, etc., even excessive force, all began at the 4th stage of cognitive intent-driven aggression. Why is that so important to understand? When we think about all the programs that are out there today, let's take an example, sexual harassment. Isn't sexual harassment represent someone already sexually harassing another individual? Absolutely. We've all been to the courses. And you're taught how to identify sexual harassment and you're taught how to report it. You're not taught how to prevent it. So all of these things, sexual harassment, conflict resolution, bullying, abuse, discrimination, even excessive force, all teach us how to identify and report it. It does not teach us how to prevent it. But guess what? We know what the precursors to these elements are. Those things in stages 1, 2, and 3 give us the ability to identify these behaviors, engage, and diffuse it before someone actually gets to these levels with scientific reliability and without violating privacy regulations. That's critical to understand. Now, you'll also notice that these are conjoined, both primal and cognitive are conjoined during this escalation phase. What does that mean? For this example, I am going to be an inconsiderate person. I don't think of myself as an aggressor, but I'm creating victims, aren't I? I'm creating victims around me, so this is aggressive behavior. But I say something that offends you. Boom. You're offended by what I say, and because of it, you get a boost of adrenaline. That's primal in nature, isn't it? Then you decide you're going to say something to me. That's intent-driven. That's cognitive. I'm now offended from what you said, so I get a boost of adrenaline. That's primal in nature. I decide to act against you. That's intent-driven. That's cognitive. So you can see how one builds on top of the next until, of course, we get to the crisis phase. And then we have something more. We'll get into that in a moment. But the obvious question we have to ask ourselves, can we rely on body language, behavior, communication indicators alone by themselves? No, we can't. So for this, we develop what we call the judicious interview. The judicious interview is founded on scientific cause and effect principles. In other words, we ask specific questions, or we take specific action that produces a predictable result if someone's intention is to harm. That's kind of our secret sauce. We have the ability to identify someone who intends to harm, and not just that they intend to harm, but at what stage or level they are, so we can apply the corresponding skill sets to maximize our result without ever getting to that issue of excessive force, because it is all commensurate with the level of aggression that we see. But it's all founded in science, ladies and gentlemen. So now we get to the crisis phase. What do we see? In primal aggression, what would you expect to see? Someone spiraling out of control into panic and or rage. And can this person be lethal in the extreme? Yes, they can be. But most typically, this primal aggressor can be diffused by simply removing the object of their anxiety. But how about that cognitive aggressor? This person becomes tactical. If you're ex-military like myself or law enforcement, you tend to think tactical means well thought out. It doesn't mean that here. What it means is this individual has identified the object of their aggression, and they intend to destroy this object. And you can identify this behavior and engage and diffuse it from occurring. What do we see in the extreme? At the 9th stage cognitive aggressor, the perpetrator of murder, suicide, or terrorist, this is a person whose goal it is to give up their life for a cause. And their body language and behavior reflect this intention, as we talked about those looks that we spoke about earlier. But also, I often tell security and law enforcement, you do not want to approach a 9th stage cognitive aggressor in uniform. Why? Because there's a high probability they will instantly start shooting or push that button if they have explosives. Then we have the 8th stage cognitive aggressor, who the murderer or combatant in a military sense, who's prepared to give up their life for a cause, but intend to survive. And that changes their behavior. Then we have the 7th stage. This is the complicit tactician, completely complicit with the 8th and 9th level. They want certain people to die, but they're not going to kill them, nor are they going to put themselves that much at risk, because they're going to inspire other people to do this, like the late Osama bin Laden or a terrorist handler or someone helping with logistics, an accomplice. Each is a precursor to the next. Each enable you to get out. It may only be moments now, but it'll give you a chance to get out in front of that horrific moment of commitment and can take control of those and mitigate that before it actually occurs. But here's the key. We have a 6th stage, a 5th, a 4th, a 3rd, a 2nd, a 1st, and a 0 baseline. And no matter where you are on this good earth, there's a 0 baseline. And now we're looking for what are your expectations and what are the aggression deviations from that expectation. But one of the most difficult things is to produce evidence-based results. I had the pleasure and honor of presenting to ASIS International's now GSX conference a few years ago. And a lot of directors of security came up to me and said, the day that I dread the most is the day I have to go before my CEO and demonstrate to that CEO that the budget they're spending on me is worthwhile. Why? Because I'm forced to prove a negative. Nobody's died, so it's all worthwhile, right? Well, we need evidence-based best practices, ladies and gentlemen. That's what I intend to share with you. You see, if you find someone at stage 3 and now you record them at stage 4, you now have a trend, don't you? Now they're at stage 5. Now they're on the path to violence. Does this mean they're going to be violent tomorrow? Absolutely not. It means you need to have the sense of urgency to engage and diffuse. But if we engage and diffuse someone at stage 5, because remember, diffusing means they no longer have an intent to harm one or others. So what does that mean? It means they no longer have an intent. So haven't we preventing any subsequent violence from that individual? Absolutely we have. So we can demonstrate actual prevention by virtue of our system. So let's assume 100 people go through this program. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not expecting a lot of 7, 8s, and 9s. We're expecting to catch them at 3, 4s, and 5s and prevent them. And now, because they no longer have an intent to harm, 90 of those individuals are back being productive members of the team. Of the remaining 10, 5 are in counseling, 5 have been suspended pending a more thorough investigation. So you can proudly pronounce that your facilities are, as safe as possible, the highest form of evidence-based best practice. That's unheard of anywhere else. Now, one of the questions we're going to address is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity. Now, I need to let you know that I know nothing about cybersecurity. What I do know about humans and aggression. So can we identify an intended harm to you in a cyber attack? How can you tell when someone who was worthy of your trust just a month ago, a week ago, became disgruntled or became compromised, and today intend to be treacherous? Well, we know that it is not instinctual for one human to attack another. You have to disconnect, depersonalize, turn this person into an object in order to attack them. So we can identify those disconnections early on in stages 1, 2, and 3. You see, this individual will disconnect from the people around them, and we can identify those disconnections, engage, and either diffuse or mitigate that issue. How about for those of you in human resource? Distrustful behavior, the critical to having any form of true relationship, teamwork, leadership, or loyalty is that element of trust. And you lose that element of trust, and you no longer have good teamwork, leadership, and loyalty. So distrustful behavior, ladies and gentlemen, is aggressive behavior. We can identify this aggressive behavior, engage and diffuse it, which enhances teamwork, leadership, and loyalty, which goes to another question about performance and productivity. You enhance both performance and productivity, and if you happen to work for a profit-based organization, profitability is all well served by CAPS. I told you that this is founded in science. It is scientifically reliable. So what does that mean? In science, reliability refers to consistency of results throughout, so you have to be able to demonstrate that it is reliable and that it produces either the same or similar results. Well, we took this, as Marcus was telling you, to Eastern Kentucky universities, to their SAT team, their Student Assistant Intervention team. And over a 2-year period, they used our CAPS system. And at the end of it, they pronounced to us, and you can read it here, now that we have had our critical aggression prevention system in place for 2 years, we're very pleased with its utility. The CAPS meter of emerging aggression, which is the central analysis tool, produced evaluations and results that were consistent with the observations of those of our student assistant intervention team, the vast majority of which were PhDs. Incidentally, the director of mental health was part of this team. She could not and would not talk to us about mental illness or mental disorder, but she could and did talk to us about aggressive behavior. So for the first time, all of these elements are working together, speaking the same language, using the same common denominator to identify aggressive behavior, engage, and diffuse it before it became a problem. So what does this thing look like? Well, first we have an app. And we have individual apps. And as you can see, at $49 annually, it's a very minor cost. But what you see is we can forensically record and longitudinally track aggressive behavior without violating HIPAA, FERPA in our schools, or the Civil Rights Act. You can see that we display aggressive behavior. You see behavior, communication, and demeanor, interactions, all of these elements, and they're not only covered by the number, in other words, it's telling you what level of aggression this is, but it's also color code for green is low risk, yellow is moderate risk, and red is high risk. Here's the key, though, also. It gives you a threat level. There's your meter of emerging aggression. It tells you what the highest level of threat, because, ladies and gentlemen, if you're prepared for the highest level of threat, then you will not be blindsided or caught off guard. So we make sure that by making sure that you see the highest level of threat, although at a glance you can see the totality of the circumstances, they're making the best professional judgment. Also, it offers responses. You will see that this says best practice responses stage 6, which is the level that the highest level seen here. Now, you've already been trained, so you know what to do, but this gives you recommendations for that level of aggression. It includes emergency procedures. If you're part of an organization, we can change those and put your own emergency procedures. You can actually download and send PDFs or share with other people that have the app. So that's the app as an individual. But for a corporate or a governmental employer, here we have the dashboard. Now, you have aggression first observers that see and observe aggressive behavior. What do? They put this information in their app. But let's see, who are these people? They're on the front lines of aggressive behavior. They're security, they're receptionists, they're all kinds of individuals that see things up front. Coaches and teachers in our schools. God, that would have been such a value from the last couple of days we've experienced. So they put this information in their app. What happens? It immediately goes into the dashboard where everything is secure, and an email goes out instantly to all certified aggression managers. Because what we want is the certified aggression manager, who are highly trained, to tell us, do they know this person? Do they know about this behavior? Can they add anything to the circumstances that have been put in by the aggression first observer? Then the administrator then assigns one or more of these certified aggression managers to engage with the aggressor, start a diffusing process, conduct the judicious interview. Now, What kind of a team should we have? We highly recommend a multidisciplined team. Why? Because I haven't been on a college campus or a corporation where security hasn't pulled me aside and said, John, human resources, mental health, social services, they just don't get it. They don't understand and respect threat well enough, so we don't share everything we have with them. Then I get within the organization, and human resource and mental health and social services pull me aside and say, John, we're a little concerned that security can get too heavy-handed. So we don't share everything we have with them. What happens? We create departmental silos that leave gaps that aggressors simply walk through. That's unbelievable. That it's now we're working all with the same language. We can all work together. So we eliminate these gaps. So who should be these people? Often they're threat assessment, behavioral intervention teams. They can be managers, supervisor, head nurses, head departments, principals, assistant principals. They can be anyone who you feel they should be, but these are the people that are going to engage and start the diffusing process. And we train them for that. So then what happens? The administrator assigns one or more of these certified aggression managers. They go out and they engage and they diffuse and they conduct a judicious interview. And on that basis, they come back and they report, what did I see? How did I respond? What was the result? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a scientific process. Now, does it mean validation? One case does not make validation. But 50 cases, 100 cases, 500 cases, 1,000 cases, you're building a validation that would stand most any scrutiny. So let's take a quick look at this dashboard and see how it works. What do we see? We see number one at the top, there are all kinds of ways to do searches. So you can search the database any way that you wish to do so. But you put in who are the first observers, who are the certified aggression managers. We look at existing cases, and incidentally, those existing cases are color-coded. So your eyes go right to where they need to be to go to the most threatening and address those things that in priority. Then what actions are being taken? Maybe Johnny needs counseling. Maybe Johnny needs coaching, and that's going to occur next week. So that occurs at the following week. You want to go get back with this person. So it has the reminder system built in to have you go back and conduct the follow-up judicious interview to make sure that Johnny no longer has an intent to harm and therefore can continue on being a productive member of the team. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our information. So let us go through these questions, and Marcus and I can go through them, and I'll be happy to answer them. Marcus, do you want to read them off, or would you want me to start? How would you like us to proceed? And Marcus, I can't hear you. So let's go through them because I can't hear you. I'm going to start.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, now I can hear you. Now I can hear you.
So I would say if you can bring back the question. Oh, you have them back up. So yes, you can go ahead.
So how does this program incorporate workplace design, administrative practices, workplace practices as part of a prevention strategy? Great question. Our system works independently of all the other systems. So it doesn't have to affect them in any way, shape, or form. That's one of the beauties of our system. How do remote and hybrid work factors into this assessment? Well, we're looking at aggressive behavior. Now, obviously, if we're working with that individual and they're on a hybrid basis, so we get to see them on occasion at least, then we get to see that body language and behavior along the way. Remote, again, you're relying on more audio types of connections or video based upon a Zoom call or one of these types of calls. And you're using those. So you can use it to agree. Obviously, it's a little diminished as opposed to standing in front of someone.
Yeah, and I just wanted to follow up on that because oftentimes I'm wondering in the precursor evaluations, because we have employees sometimes that aren't on camera, right? And so you're really going on a lot less maybe indicators that are telling you a first observer may not correctly observe someone's tone of voice given a certain day or a certain time. So I just was very fascinated about your work and wondered, how you might help these aggression managers that are certified help first observers to be able to describe the behaviors of people that are on Zoom, for instance.
Right, absolutely. Well, we're actually looking at, all humans. This applies to all humans. So if we're watching a human, then we're going to get a sense on Zoom, as an example,
Mhm,
what their body language and behavior is telling us.
mhm,
And then realizing that they're going to have this certified aggression manager, higher staged individual, more effectively trained, who will follow up on that. And maybe this person will want to meet with that person
mhm,
on a more physical basis to better do a better read on their body language and behavior. So
mhm,
that may be an option there too, Marcus.
mhm.
Each of this system is designed to have follow-up and then recording and tracking this behavior, and realize that we're identifying actual aggressive behavior. We're not suggesting that someone who's at stage 2 is going to be stage 9 or stage 8. We're saying you're at stage 2 and we want to engage you at that level and diffuse you from going any further, but also help you become whole if need be.
Mhm,
Help coach you to circumstances that's better.
mhm.
Next question. Do you want to
Yeah,
read it?
sure. Well,
Okay.
because John, we're in such you may or may not agree, we're in a world that has become more and more violent. I think
Yeah.
violence has always been a part of the world, but it just seems more and more violence. It's almost a
Yeah.
culture of violence.
Yeah.
And so people are leaving that culture, bringing it to work, bringing it to school, bringing it to wherever. So, what would you advise to employers, or do you advise employers to drive kind of a culture of safety along with what you recommend?
Well, the system that we have, first of all, it should be said that the system that we have is not a punitive system. A punitive system is a judicious system where you identify fault or blame and you apply some punitive measure. Uh, our system is designed to identify an individual who's gotten off track and help bring them back on track.
Mhm,
So people are not as fearful of a system like ours to start with. So they're more likely to engage in a system like ours
mhm,
to start with.
mhm,
Um, yes, the world is getting more violent around us, and we can apply we can talk about and spend all of our time discussing what the reasons why that's occurring. But
mhm,
we don't want to get caught up in that
mhm,
because, I mean, as an example, parents should be more responsible, right?
mhm,
Well, we all agree with that, but parents are not going to be more responsible. So it's a futile process for us to pursue that. So
mhm.
what we do is we identify the single elements of aggressive behavior. And when we see that behavior, we engage and diffuse it. So
Mhm.
we're doing our part to diminish future violence by engaging and preventing any further escalation. So we're doing our part to prevent further violence, but we don't get into the reasons why. We get into the reasons. We get into the reasons why when we're talking to an individual and we've identified someone on the path. We find out what's going on with this individual, and we help coach those people back to more of a more productive end.
Yeah, and kind of related to that, John, one of the reasons that question came to mind and back more centrally to that question is that I would imagine after 50 cases or 500 cases, you're starting to see trends maybe in an organization in specific areas, and that maybe part of that will be in driving a more safe culture is emotional intelligence training. I know you talked
Sure.
earlier about fight or flight and what we might do in empowering people with tools and choices
Right.
between those times, though those could be split seconds decisions from when they go to the various stages, but making sure that enterprise wide and certainly in certain departments and groups of lines of business within an enterprise, that we provide them tools in the area of emotional intelligence. Do you think that would help to drive a culture of
Oh, no,
safety?
absolutely. All of these elements are good. We stay in our lane, so we don't get into those elements, but we highly recommend them. They're excellent. And to the point, why do corporations get involved with these sort of things? I worked for about 4 years with Aon Corporation, this largest insurance broker in the world. And I was attracted to them because they had conducted a survey in the United Kingdom of the Royal Mail, where they identified the cost of employee friction. Now, that's not assaultive and violent behavior, but simple employee friction was costing them 247 million pounds a year.
Mhm.
You see, what they identified and more importantly measured was when you have aggressors in your organization, nobody else wants to be there.
Mhm.
People come in late, they go home early, they stay longer at lunch. There's even a term called presenteeism, means someone was there, they checked in, but they were so distracted by others' aggressive behavior, they weren't productive.
Mhm.
So what we were able to do was go in and conduct these surveys, both pre and post, and demonstrate they were saving thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars, whether they were profit or not profit, of expenses they were incurring because of these aggressive behaviors.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. And I think it really does make a great segue to the next question, because I think
Yeah.
surveying is one of the ways that you can help to drive that culture of safety. So, as a human resources practitioner, and that question for us asking also from your experience, how then does the employer embed or integrate your findings and insights into every area of the business, so that it's not a a one shot effort, but that is integrated into the systems of the organization?
Our system works independently of the other systems, so it can be observed and measured and managed independently of all the other systems. Having said that, it would be wonderful. We believe that if you have an aggression free community or organization, then all of these other things are going to be affected proportionately. So
Mhm.
we would love you to measure those things along with ours to demonstrate that, yes, we're not just talking about less aggressive behavior, but we're talking about increased productivity and performance from our employee base because, frankly, they're happier.
Mhm.
They like coming into work because there isn't all of this aggressive behavior.
Mhm. Yeah. I could see where, integrating your findings would be fascinating to integrate in some of the areas around policy development, around screening, performance, around core competencies and values. So I think it is really an
Yeah,
opportunity for organizations to really integrate your findings and insights into their everyday business. I think that's where they'll get the
absolutely.
biggest bang for their buck. I
Yeah,
think number 5, John, you already answered about the capital investment, what it will cost, but
right.
what would you give as an example of the greatest return on the capital employed? So a company has X number of employees, it's 49.95 annually for them and a $1,500 set of a fee. What have you said has been the effectiveness? I know you talked about the surveys demonstrated they've saved thousands of dollars, but give us an example, maybe your favorite one of return
Well,
on.
if you have 1,000 employees, we'll just kind of take a middle of the road.
Mhm.
Uh, 1,000 employees, and we assume that 10% would either be first observers, certified aggression managers that would require an app. So 100 apps at $49.95 a piece is $4,995, just under 5,000.
Mhm.
The dashboard, $1,500. So
Mhm.
for 1,000 employees, you're talking about $6,500, something less than $6,500.
Mhm.
For a company with 1,000 employees, that's a drop in the bucket.
Mhm.
Now you compare that against. I think I saw that the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics,
Mhm.
says that under normal circumstances, that the loss of one employee will cost somewhere about 26% of that employee's salary annually. If you get into higher income people, the top echelon people, it jumped up to over 225% cost. So you retain one employee that otherwise you would lose in hiring cost and training cost. You've easily covered that cost and many times over for the whole year by saving one employee.
Yes. And what I'm looking for in that question, John, maybe you could share. I know you can't share specific detail, maybe, but maybe you can share an overview of a place where a company has adopted this and where they have remarked of having cost savings.
With any kind of training, there are 4 levels of evaluation of training, and the highest level is to get to be able to actually see and quantify, not just qualitative, but quantify the results that you're getting. I don't actually have that information to share, Marcus, because the companies don't wish to share that information.
Okay.
But I can tell you that the culture changes. And a culture of identifying aggressive behavior and diffusing it means you're enhancing trust, and you're enhancing the well-being of the people around you. And that will clearly, well, in the case of the United Kingdom, the Royal Mail and Aon's survey was 247,000, a million pounds of people coming in late, going home early, staying longer at lunch, and presenteeism.
Yeah.
So I think we could do a survey, put this in place. We can ask the employees with anonymity so we can see, we'll get truth that way. And we can ask them, have you ever come in late, gone home early? Help us quantify it. We can put that into the survey. And then we can ask that organization, what is the cost of an employee for an hour, the mean cost of an hour or a day? And we calculate a result. And frankly, that result's going to scare the living bejesus out of most organizations. Now, 6 months later, and this is what we did at Aon. 6 months later, we do that same survey after all this training and everything else. We do that survey again. And we say to them up front that we will put this in place for half the cost. Half of the cost. But in 6 months, we want 20% of that difference. Nobody took us up on it, Marcus, because there is a real scary cost of aggressive behavior in the workplace.
Yeah. In the interest of time, I'm going to go to number 7.
Sure.
The general duty clause of OSHA talks about, requires employers to provide a safe and healthful workplace. I think your work certainly helps to do that. Talk to me a little bit about how you feel about that. I think that, this takes more than reasonable steps, I think, to prevent or abate recognized violence, because it really is speaking to before the violence happens, which there isn't as much conversation as I believe, John, there needs to be among employers, among associations, not only responding to workplace violence and harassment and bullying and discrimination, but preventing them, truly preventing them. So speak to me a little bit about how you see this as a springboard for OSHA.
I love this question because I had the honor of working with Patricia Biles, who was with OSHA when she developed the workplace violence program for hospitals and healthcare so many years ago. And now OSHA has changed those regulations from requiring that companies, hospitals have a workplace violence program, but now to a workplace violence prevention program. Well, we're the only system that will produce an evidence-based result for that.
Wow. And I'm going to go to the last question and then give you an opportunity to have any closing remarks. I'm going to go to that
Sure.
question number 8. And really, that question number 8, John, is around um, uh, bullying, the internet as a potential weapon,
Right.
because um, even with the pandemic, that people have utilized the internet and cloud-based applications more in remote and hybrid situations, and there is the potential for that um, type of harassment, and of course, type of bullying to escalate into some workplace violence or violence of some other form. And we've seen that, right? And
Absolutely.
so, talk to us a little bit about how these first observers might do sentiment analysis, because I think you'd have to be able to have access to do sentiment analysis when people are tweeting out or posting or commenting things that raise the same kind of behavioral flags that you would see and maybe a face-to-face observation. um, are you seeing that becoming more prevalent?
Well, I obviously see it more prevalent today than it was a year ago today. But uh, the best answer I can give you is bullying is aggressive behavior.
Mhm, mhm,
So and that was, they all start at the fourth stage of cognitive aggression. This is where an individual, usually covertly, begins to attack another individual.
mhm,
So we can identify the precursors to that behavior, which enable us to get out in front and prevent it from occurring.
mhm,
So our objective is not to, I mean, that's what our society is built on today, Marcus, is
mhm,
to react to all these things.
mhm,
And we see where that's not working.
mhm,
I mean, sadly, it's not working.
mhm,
We need to get out in front and start preventing these behaviors from occurring. And that is what CAPS does. It identifies those precursors to bullying and enables you to, and look, this can actually be in the hands of parents.
mhm,
Think about that value.
mhm,
Think about the application of a parent with these skill sets.
mhm, mhm,
You get the ability to prevent these things from occurring. And because they're science based, you can say to someone that is aggressive behavior
mhm.
and therefore inappropriate. It's really hard to tell.
Yeah. John Byrnes, thank you so much for your time and the volume of work that you've done here. You
Thank
have been lauded, and you should be, for the volume of work that you're doing. And I want organizations to know where they can go. Some organizations, as you know, have a workplace violence policy, have a sexual
Yeah,
harassment and discrimination policy, but maybe not a process by which they are regularly and effectively identifying the precursors and the behaviors prior to it happening. So if you
exactly
can
right.
just share with employers how
Can
they
you
can
show my
connect with
last?
you.
Yes. Can you show my last slide, Marcus? That shows all of my contact information.
Okay.
And that way, anybody that has an interest in getting in touch with me, there's my telephone number, my email address, my website. There's an incredible amount of information on my website.
Mhm.
On LinkedIn, I have over 25,000 first connections because I have over 60 articles published there. All free information, easy to access and learn from.
All right. So they can contact you at www.aggressionmanagement.com for those who might
Yes.
just be listening and not viewing. And also they can email you at John, JOHN, at aggression, AGGRESSION, management.com. John, thank you
And
so much for joining us today. I am
it's
so
my great
honored to have
pleasure.
you here. Your
Thank you
work
so very
is
much.
great. And I hope employers, I know you have a ton of first connections, but I know there are other employers out there who
Yeah,
may not be taking advantage of the opportunity for this CAPS system and the work that it can help your organization create the kind of workplace in which culture drives business results, and employees, your visitors, residents, citizens, your customers, and stakeholders are all in a safe and healthy environment. So
that's right.
thank you. Thank
Exactly.
you. Thank you
Thank
so much
you,
for joining.
Marcus. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes. That's John Byrnes, Dr. John Byrnes. And if you didn't gather this from this presentation, he is passionate about helping organizations prevent workplace violence, prevent bullying, prevent harassment and discrimination, right? And not just address it, which we must address it, right? But we should also be working, actively advocating for helping individuals who, as John said it, I thought eloquently, get off track. You have uh, people that you've invested thousands and maybe tens of thousands of dollars in that you don't want to just be punitive with or be punitive as first choice. You want to get them back on track, but you need a system by which you can monitor what's happening so that you can help them be geared to that track before it's too late. And we all know what too late looks like. And in order for us to stop the picture, the visual of too late, we have to start very early. We have to start at the inception. We have to get deep into the precursors. We have to use systems just like this great system from Dr. John Byrnes and CAPS to ensure that our organizations are really and truly addressing what has become culturally very violent, but the opportunity to make a difference and change, we can address it by taking the steps to getting into the Center for Aggression Management CAPS program for our organizations. You can reach John for more, and thank you for tuning in today. If you're not living in the center of your purpose and passion, I hope Dr. John Byrnes' passion ignites you to find out what you can do to make a difference in our world. The world is speaking to you and asking for your response. And I hope that you today are inspired to do just that. Look to see you soon. Have a grateful weekend. Take care of yourselves and others.